What if everything you thought you knew about Aaliyah's story wasn't the full story? Why are old photos suddenly going viral again? Why is Nicki Minaj dropping cryptic posts that have the internet in detective mode? And why, after all these years, is the spotlight shifting toward Aaliyah's own family? Because this isn't just about a plane crash anymore. This is about power, silence, industry secrets, and the uncomfortable questions nobody wanted to ask. When Aaliyah passed away, the world mourned a rising icon gone too soon. The tragedy was labeled an accident, case closed, or was it? Now social media is reopening files people thought were buried. Old interviews are resurfacing, conflicting statements are being replayed, and whispers about contracts, settlements, and behind-the-scenes decisions are spreading faster than wildfire. Did people ignore red flags? Did the industry protect its own? Or is this just another example of the internet rewriting history for clicks? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will have you questioning everything you thought was settled. So let's slow this down and really unpack what's happening, because this isn't just random internet noise. This is a full-blown cultural re-examination that started with a few posts and spiraled into something much bigger. When Nicki Minaj began sharing old images and cryptic captions, most people assumed it was just another social media moment. A little shade here, a little controversy there. That's normal in hip-hop. But this time, the tone felt different. The focus wasn't just on industry rivals. It wasn't about charts or awards. It was about history. Specifically, it's the history surrounding Aaliyah. And whenever Aaliyah's name resurfaces, emotions run high. She wasn't just a singer. She was a symbol. Youth, talent, mystery, and a career that felt like it was just getting started when it suddenly ended. Her death in a plane crash was ruled an aviation accident. Overloaded aircraft. Pilot error. Official reports close the case, but official answers don't always stop public questions. Because over time, people started connecting dots. First, the early years. Aaliyah entered the industry young. Very young. She was surrounded by powerful adults before she could legally drive. Producers, executives, mentors, and one of the most controversial figures in her story, R. Kelly. Their marriage was documented, later annulled. Legal records confirmed it happened. Years later, documentaries would revisit that era, prompting people to ask how something like that was allowed to occur in plain sight. That question has never fully gone away. Who knew? Who approved? Who stayed silent? Then there's the role of family. Her uncle, Barry Hankerson, was not just a relative. He was a record executive. He ran the label she was signed to. That intertwining of family and business is where things start to get complicated. Because when money, contracts, and bloodlines mix, accountability becomes blurry. Over the years, interviews have resurfaced where he claimed he was unaware of certain situations at the time. At one point, he suggested that other family members may have known more than he did. That single suggestion is what the internet grabbed onto like gasoline meeting a spark. And now, thanks to renewed attention online, the people are revisiting every detail of Aaliyah's career timeline. Her early collaborations, the older men around her, the power dynamics that today would trigger massive public backlash. Social media users are applying modern standards to past events and asking whether warning signs were ignored because the industry machine was moving too fast to stop. Then the conversation shifts to another powerful name, Jay-Z. Old photos resurface. Ages get compared. Comment sections explode. It's important to note that no official accusations or charges have been brought related to those images. But in today's climate, perception alone can ignite a firestorm. And that's exactly what happened. Nicki's posts didn't present legal documents. They didn't offer sworn testimony. What they did was something arguably more powerful in the digital era. They raised doubt. And doubt spreads faster than proof. Suddenly, fans weren't just talking about grooming culture in general terms. They were asking why so many teenage female artists in the past were consistently surrounded by significantly older, influential men. They were asking why contracts were signed so young, why NDAs were reportedly involved, why silence seemed to follow controversy. Then comes the most sensitive area of all: the plane crash. Official investigations concluded the aircraft was overloaded and improperly operated. The pilot reportedly had substances in his system and issues with licensing. The crash occurred shortly after takeoff. Those are documented findings. But alongside those findings, stories have circulated for years that Aaliyah was hesitant to board that flight, that she expressed concern, that she didn't feel comfortable. There is no verified medical record proving she was given anything to force her compliance. No court ruling confirming foul play by her family. But the rumor persists. And in the age of true crime podcasts and deep-dive YouTube exposés, persistent rumors become fuel. People began looking at financial aspects next. Wrongful death lawsuits were filed, settlements were reached. Many details remain confidential. Confidentiality breeds speculation. Speculation breeds conspiracy. Conspiracy breeds content. Online commentators claim large sums were involved. Exact numbers are debated. What is confirmed is that legal actions followed the crash. What is not confirmed is the narrative some now push, suggesting premeditation or intentional wrongdoing by family members. That distinction matters. But the internet doesn't always operate in distinctions. It operates in emotion. And emotion says this: how could someone so young, so valuable to the industry, be placed in so many questionable environments? Was it ambition? Was it trust in powerful people? Was it simply the norms of that era? Critics argue that during the 1990s and early 2000s, the music industry had fewer guardrails. Power imbalances were rarely challenged. Young talent was often treated as product first, person second. If that was the culture, then perhaps what happened wasn't an isolated betrayal, but part of a larger systemic issue. Others push back hard against that narrative. They argue that hindsight makes everything look suspicious, that tragedy doesn't automatically equal conspiracy, that applying today's awareness to yesterday's decisions can distort context. And right in the middle of this debate stands Aaliyah's mother, a woman who has largely remained private since her daughter's passing. She has defended her child's legacy. She has refuted certain allegations over the years. She has not been charged with any crime related to her daughter's career or death. Yet the question being whispered online is harsh and direct. Did she protect her daughter enough? That question alone is emotionally explosive, because it touches on parental responsibility, industry pressure, and the impossible position of guiding a young star through an adult world. Nicki's involvement didn't create these questions. It amplified them. By posting, hinting, and comparing timelines, she reopened wounds that many assumed were sealed. And once reopened, they invited a new generation to examine everything with fresh eyes. And what's happening now is less about a single accusation and more about a cultural audit. Fans are reviewing contracts, interviews, and career decisions like detectives piecing together a cold case. Every old clip becomes evidence. Every quote becomes a clue. But evidence and interpretation are not the same thing. As this online storm grows, it forces a larger conversation about fame, guardianship, and the cost of early success. Was Aaliyah failed by individuals? Or was she caught in a system that normalized risky dynamics? That's the question hovering in the air as the debate intensifies, and it's the same question that leads directly into the next layer of this unfolding controversy. Because once you start examining the past through today's lens, the narrative doesn't just shift, it fractures. And when it fractures, new theories emerge that complicate everything even further. Because once the internet senses a crack in the official narrative, it doesn't just peek inside, it kicks the door open. As the conversation intensified, online creators began digging into timelines with the precision of amateur forensic analysts. Old contracts were discussed. Old interviews were clipped and replayed. Body language was analyzed frame by frame. And suddenly, moments that once seemed ordinary were being reinterpreted as ominous. One of the biggest talking points revolves around the business structure behind Aaliyah's career. Being signed to a label run by her own uncle, Barry Hankerson, meant that professional decisions and family decisions were intertwined. That arrangement can be protective. It can also be complicated. Because when business success depends on momentum, slowing down to address controversy can feel like financial sabotage. Critics online have started asking whether the drive to maintain her rising trajectory influenced how certain situations were handled. Not proven, not documented in court, but speculated about relentlessly. Then there's the financial layer that fuels even more suspicion. After the tragic crash, lawsuits were filed against the aircraft operator. Settlements followed. The exact details remain confidential, which is common in civil cases. But confidentiality, in the age of internet investigation, is treated like a red flag. Commentators speculate about how much money changed hands. They question who controlled what portions of the estate. They debate who had decision-making authority at various stages of her career. Again, none of this equals proof of wrongdoing, but in the online court of public opinion, perception moves faster than facts. What adds fuel to the fire is the broader cultural climate. Over the past several years, multiple high-profile figures in entertainment have faced allegations related to exploitation and abuse of power. That environment has trained audiences to look backward with skepticism. When people revisit Aaliyah's early career through that lens, they see patterns that feel unsettling. Her relationship with R. Kelly is the most documented example. The marriage certificate, the annulment, the later criminal convictions unrelated to her but connected to broader misconduct. Those confirmed facts create a foundation of distrust. If one major red flag was real, people wonder, could there have been others that were simply less visible? And when Nicki Minaj began posting images involving Jay-Z and highlighting age differences from past decades, that conversation expanded. It's crucial to note there are no official charges connecting him to wrongdoing in relation to Aaliyah. But public discourse doesn't require legal filings to generate intensity. It requires implication. It requires comparison. It requires a sense that something about the dynamic doesn't sit comfortably with modern audiences. So the debate morphs. It becomes less about isolated incidents and more about systemic power imbalance. Was Aaliyah simply a young artist navigating an adult industry the way many did at the time? Or was she uniquely vulnerable due to the specific combination of youth, fame, and family business entanglement? Anonymous commentary channels claim to have sources close to the situation, who describe tension behind the scenes. None of these claims are verified. None are backed by sworn statements, but they are repeated often enough that they start to feel tangible to viewers consuming hours of breakdown videos. Some alleged insiders describe disagreements about management decisions in her final months. Others claim there were plans to renegotiate contracts. Still, others suggest she was preparing for greater independence in her career. No official documents confirm these narratives, but speculation thrives because it fits a dramatic arc. The plane crash details resurface again and again. The aircraft was reportedly overloaded beyond recommended capacity. The pilot's qualifications were questioned after the fact. Yes, these findings are part of official investigations. But alongside those documented issues, storytellers add another layer. The rumor that she was reluctant to board, that she sensed danger, that she hesitated. There is no confirmed medical evidence showing she was sedated against her will. No court concluded that anyone forced her. Yet the story persists in blogs, forums, and commentary videos. And because it persists, it shapes perception. What makes this situation particularly volatile is the emotional weight attached to Aaliyah's legacy. She represents lost potential. She represents a career that felt unfinished. So when new theories surface, fans respond not just with curiosity, but with protectiveness. Defenders of her family argue that grief should not be weaponized into conspiracy. They emphasize that tragedies often contain logistical failures without malicious intent. They point out that running a record label and managing a rising star involves countless decisions, many of which look different in hindsight. Critics counter that proximity equals responsibility. If family members were present in her professional life, they argue, then accountability cannot be separated from business outcomes. This tension plays out across comment sections daily. Some viewers accuse online commentators of exploiting tragedy for clicks. Others insist that uncomfortable questions are necessary for historical clarity. Meanwhile, Nicki Minaj's role in reigniting the discussion remains controversial. Supporters say she is challenging industry hypocrisy. Critics say she is stirring drama without presenting concrete evidence. Either way, her involvement amplified visibility. The result is a feedback loop. Posts generate reactions. Reactions generate response videos. Response videos generate more posts. And with each cycle, the narrative grows more layered. There's also the estate factor. Control over unreleased music, licensing deals, and streaming rights has been debated publicly over the years. When her catalog finally became widely available on digital platforms long after her passing, discussions about who controlled those decisions resurfaced. Some praised the move as preserving legacy. Others questioned the delay. Again, no official wrongdoing has been established in these business matters, but the optics feed into a broader story about power and control. And that broader story is what keeps viewers watching, because it's not just about one allegation. It's about a pattern people think they see. Young female artists entering industries dominated by older men, guardians navigating fame and fortune, contracts signed under pressure, silence following controversy. Are these isolated circumstances or reflections of a larger culture? As the online investigation deepens, more archival footage resurfaces. Interviews where she appears poised beyond her years. Clips where she deflects personal questions with careful diplomacy. Observers now dissect those moments for hidden signals. Were those answers rehearsed? Were they protective? Or were they simply the responses of a teenager trained to handle media scrutiny? Interpretation depends on perspective. And perspective is everything in this storm. Because without new legal filings or official investigations, what remains is narrative. And narrative is shaped by whoever speaks the loudest. At this point, the conversation has evolved beyond a single claim about whether a mother sold out her daughter. It has become a referendum on how the entertainment industry treated young talent during that era. It has become a debate about guardianship, ambition, and hindsight accountability. Some believe the renewed scrutiny is overdue. Others believe it borders on revisionist speculation. But one undeniable truth remains. Once doubt enters a story, it rarely leaves quietly. And as more creators promise deeper dives, more anonymous sources surface, and more archived clips circulate, the pressure builds. Because if there is nothing hidden, then the narrative will eventually stabilize. But if there are details that were overlooked, ignored, or misunderstood, the digital age has proven that time does not always bury them. Instead, it preserves them. And preservation means that every unresolved question continues echoing, waiting for either confirmation or closure. And it's that waiting, that lingering uncertainty that pushes this controversy into its most volatile phase yet. Its most volatile phase yet, because once a controversy shifts from emotional speculation to public pressure, the stakes change. Now the conversation is no longer confined to comment sections. It's bleeding into mainstream media panels, entertainment podcasts, and cultural think pieces. What began as cryptic posts and resurfaced photos has evolved into a broader examination of power, protection, and responsibility in the music industry. At the center of it all remains Aaliyah's legacy. And legacy is complicated. When fans revisit her career, they don't just see chart-topping hits. They see a teenager navigating adult boardrooms. They see a young woman carrying the weight of expectations that most adults would struggle to handle. They see grace under pressure, but they also see vulnerability. The renewed scrutiny has sparked calls, not for accusations without proof, but for transparency. Some commentators argue that if there is nothing to hide, then clarity would calm the storm. Others point out that reopening decades-old wounds may only deepen grief for a family that has already endured unimaginable loss. The reality is that no official body has reopened the aviation investigation into her death. The crash was ruled an accident based on documented findings regarding aircraft weight and pilot error. There is no current criminal case targeting her family. That fact remains unchanged. However, what has changed is the cultural appetite for accountability. The entertainment industry has undergone massive shifts in recent years. Executives have been exposed, contracts re-examined. Past behaviors once normalized are now condemned. In that environment, fans naturally revisit stories that once felt settled. And because Nicki Minaj chose to amplify certain historical images and timelines, the conversation took on renewed urgency. Her involvement doesn't constitute evidence, it doesn't trigger legal action, but it influences perception, and perception influences public discourse. Some observers suggest that if new information ever surfaced, it would likely come in the form of documented testimony or legal filings rather than social media hints. And others believe that the digital age itself acts as a watchdog, surfacing patterns long before formal investigations begin. Meanwhile, the business side of Aaliyah's catalog continues to be discussed. Control over music rights, estate decisions, and posthumous releases often raises questions for any artist who passes prematurely. In this case, the delay in making her catalog widely available for streaming led to years of debate about who held authority and why decisions unfolded the way they did. Again, debate does not equal wrongdoing, but in a climate already charged with suspicion, every unanswered question feels magnified. Public reaction has split into distinct camps. One group argues that the renewed conversation is necessary. They say examining history through a modern lens allows society to learn from past failures. They emphasize that systemic power imbalances often thrive in silence, and that asking difficult questions honors rather than disrespects a legacy. Another group strongly disagrees. They argue that retroactively assigning malicious intent without concrete proof risks damaging reputations unfairly. They warn that social media's appetite for scandal can distort nuance and oversimplify complex realities. Both sides claim to be protecting Aaliyah's memory. That's what makes this so emotionally charged. Everyone involved insists their perspective is rooted in respect. Yet the conclusions differ drastically. As tension builds, the possibility of legal response lingers in the background. If public claims were to cross into provable defamation, attorneys could intervene. If new evidence ever emerged that contradicted the official aviation report, deregulatory agencies could review it. But as of now, neither scenario has materialized. Instead, what exists is narrative escalation. Creators continue producing deep-dive analyses. Comment sections fill with theories. Old interviews are scrutinized for hidden meanings. Each new video promises the missing piece, even when no new documented evidence is presented. This is the paradox of modern controversy. Information circulates faster than verification. Emotion spreads faster than documentation. And yet, amid the noise, one truth remains central. Aaliyah's impact on music and culture is undeniable. Her artistry influenced an entire generation. Her style, sound, and composure continue to inspire artists decades later. That enduring influence complicates the conversation further, because when a cultural icon is involved, every theory carries amplified weight. What would accountability even look like at this stage? Public acknowledgement, institutional reflection, a broader industry reckoning. Some analysts suggest that the real outcome of this renewed scrutiny may not be a courtroom development, but a cultural shift. The way young artists are mentored today, the oversight around contracts involving minors, the scrutiny applied to age gaps in professional dynamics. Those areas have already evolved significantly since the 1990s. In that sense, perhaps the debate itself contributes to change, regardless of whether it uncovers new evidence. Still, unanswered questions linger in the public imagination. Did industry pressure create environments that were inherently risky for young talent? Were warning signs misunderstood or minimized? Or are present-day observers projecting modern awareness onto past decisions that were interpreted differently at the time? The absence of definitive answers leaves space for speculation, and speculation thrives in that space. As this story continues circulating, the biggest consequence so far has been narrative polarization. Trust in institutions, in labels, in powerful figures from that era is being reevaluated. Even without new legal findings, reputational scrutiny can reshape how history is remembered. For Aaliyah's family, this renewed attention may feel like reopening scars. For fans, it feels like seeking clarity for a loss that never fully healed. And somewhere between those perspectives lies the uncomfortable complexity of truth. Because truth is rarely as cinematic as online storytelling. It's often layered, mundane in parts, and shaped by context that outsiders cannot fully access. Yet the demand for answers persists. If nothing else emerges, the controversy may gradually settle back into the background of cultural memory. But if new documentation were ever to surface, the reaction would likely be swift and intense. For now, the situation remains in a holding pattern. No reopened case, no confirmed criminal findings against her mother, no verified evidence overturning the aviation report. What remains is conversation. Conversation about power, about guardianship, about hindsight, about how fame can blur boundaries. And perhaps the most sobering realization is this. Sometimes the most explosive narratives are fueled not by new facts, but by unresolved emotions. Aaliyah's story carries emotional weight because it ended abruptly. Because potential was interrupted. Because fans never saw the full arc of her career. When a life ends suddenly, the mind searches for reasons beyond mechanical failure. It looks for meaning. It looks for accountability. It looks for closure. Whether closure will ever come in a form that satisfies everyone remains uncertain. But what is certain is that her legacy continues to spark dialogue decades later. And dialogue, even when messy, reflects impact. As this chapter of renewed scrutiny unfolds, the industry watches, the public debates, and history remains open to interpretation, shaped by evolving standards and collective memory. In the end, perhaps the most important question isn't whether one person sold out another, but how systems operate around young talent and whether those systems have learned from the past. Because if the purpose of revisiting history is growth, then the real measure of progress will be seen not in viral posts or trending debates, but in how future artists are protected. And until that protection feels unquestionable, stories like this will continue to resurface, demanding reflection long after headlines fade. So now the question is in your hands. After hearing all of this, what do you really think? Was this just another tragic accident wrapped in years of internet speculation? Or does the resurfacing of old interviews, contracts, and power dynamics make you look at the entire situation differently? Do you believe social media is finally asking the right questions? Or is this another example of the internet turning pain into conspiracy? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand on this. But keep it respectful, because at the center of all this noise is a legacy that still means something to millions of people. If you made it this far, you already know this conversation is bigger than just one headline. It's about the industry. It's about power. It's about how history gets remembered. Make sure you like this video if you want more deep dives like this. Subscribe if you're ready for unfiltered breakdowns that question the narrative without ignoring the facts. And turn on notifications, because if anything new develops in this story, you already know we're going to break it down right here.